Tonight, we're taking an in-depth look at officer-involved shootings in Maine. We're analyzing the numbers.
Can you see any rhyme or reason to those numbers?
And talking to those who've been there.
If you're making the ultimate decision of taking somebody's life, that's a big deal.
We'll take you through the use of force training.
The adrenaline is going, the fear is going, the unknown is there.
And hear from the young men and women learning how to make this tough call.
I would ask myself, could I really do this in real life if I had to? And now the more we do it, the easier it is for me to say yes.
We explain what happens after a shooting, the review process, and why some want to see it change.
That's really only part of the equation.
And a Maine family shares their story.
I think it was a cry for help, and it makes me sick that it was a cry for help and he didn't get help, he got shot.
It's all coming up as we take an in-depth look at officer-involved shootings in Maine.
Well, guys, that's right. In Maine, the Attorney General's office keeps track of all officer-involved shootings in the state. So that means anytime a law enforcement officer, be it a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, or a game warden, fires their weapon, there is a review.
The Attorney General's office has been doing this since 1995. From 95 to the end of 2016, Maine officers were involved in 120 shootings. 55 of those were fatal. If you take a look at the numbers from 95 to 2005, Maine officers fired their weapons 40 times. We saw that number double between 2006 and 2016, with the Attorney General reviewing 80 officer-involved shooting cases. We wanted to see how Maine compared to other states with similar population sizes. To do this, we called the Attorney Generals and state police departments in New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, and Delaware. In a 10-year period between 2005 and 2015, Vermont had the fewest amount of cases at 30. Rhode Island had 31, New Hampshire 33, and Delaware 36. Maine saw a significantly higher amount, 77 officer-involved shootings. We brought these numbers to the executive director of the Maine Chiefs of Police Association, Robert Schwartz.
Can you see any rhyme or reason to those numbers?
I can't really. I mean, a person with a gun in New Hampshire can be just as dangerous as a person with a gun in Maine or any of these other places. But we've been fortunate in Maine. We don't have a lot of shootings, which is, I guess one may say one is too many, but compared to the climate today in the public, the people that the police deal with, they're dealing with the mentally ill, the people, the drug users, they're dealing with a lot of people. It's surprising there aren't more.
So officers must make a very personal decision based on what they reasonably believe is a deadly threat. So how did they learn when to pull the trigger? They learn by doing it here.
We just need to have you turn around and we're just going to...
This is unbelievable.
It's not the real world, but it's close. There's yelling,
Other hand on your back,
fighting, and mere seconds to make a decision.
Drop the weapon. The adrenaline is going, the fear is going, the unknown is there.
This is scenario-based training. Police Academy cadets go through the classroom portion of the program.
Go away, guys. I didn't do anything.
And then they go hands-on, putting what they've learned into practice.
Scenario-based training is the start of the hands-on process of actually being a decision maker.
John Rogers is the director of the Criminal Justice Academy. He says the scenarios are based on situations other officers have seen.
You are initiating a traffic stop.
From a routine traffic stop to a domestic violence call.
Get out of here, guys. I didn't hit her. That's unbelievable.
People have a tendency to learn by doing. And if they make mistakes, that's okay. We fix the mistakes here in a training environment, and that's why we use scenario-based training.
We're going to do the one with the handgun.
Scenario-based training allows future police officers and sheriff's deputies to make these difficult decisions in a practice environment.
Sir, drop the weapon. Drop the weapon.
We saw many scenarios in which cadets had to decide when to use deadly force. Cadets are trained to match deadly force with deadly force, even in a situation where a person is threatening the force against himself.
Sir, go ahead and put the knife down for me.
I don't want to hurt anybody else.
Go ahead and put the knife down for me.
My wife left me. I have nothing.
After every scenario, there's a discussion where cadets must explain what they did and why.
It was a deadly force scenario when he had the knife. It doesn't take very long for him to turn the knife onto me. So when he dropped the knife, there was no more imminent threat of deadly force. So that is when it de-escalated and I put my firearm away.
Cadet Christopher Simpson walks us through this one.
Sir, drop the weapon. Drop the weapon.
The scenario we were working with today was a subject with a weapon. And so what I did was I went into the situation with my weapon already drawn because when somebody has a weapon that presents an imminent threat of deadly force to myself, and so I need to be prepared to deal with that.
Some say it's not easy.
I would ask myself, could I really do this in real life if I had to?
Megan Orchard says she feels prepared to use deadly force since she's already done it here.
It takes an emotional toll on you, but that's why we're here, to learn how to deal with that and learn how to articulate it and how to know whether or not we're justified.
Since 1995, Maine officers have been involved in 121 shootings. CBS 13 reviewed the cases and discovered the Attorney General's office has deemed every shooting legally justified. Rogers attributes that to the training.
The first thought I have is they must have been properly trained.
He says not every police academy graduate in the U.S. goes through this type of training.
Keep your hands in your pockets.
There are some academies that you go to college for a 2-year associate degree training program, and at the end of the 2 years you take the state law enforcement officer certification exam, and that's your full-time officer.
No hands-on training.
That's correct. And it might be a reason why some of the problems that are occurring across the United States are happening.
One question we had, why don't officers shoot to wound or shoot to disarm? Coming up next at 5:30, we speak to an officer who made the decision to pull the trigger almost 20 years ago. He explains his case and why officers shoot for center mass in the body. That's coming up next as we continue our in-depth look at officer-involved shootings.
If you're making the ultimate decision of taking somebody's life, that's a big deal.
Almost 20 years later, Winslow Police Chief Sean O'Leary says he has a vivid memory of November 6, 1997.
It was an event that I always knew that could potentially happen. I never wished it because I got into this line of work to help people and to do service to my community, but I always knew it may happen.
It happened when O'Leary was working as a Brunswick police officer. He and his partner responded to a domestic dispute. 55-year-old Richard Weymouth had fallen from his wheelchair, and there was an outstanding warrant for his arrest.
And at one point, while we were confirming that there was a warrant for Richard Weymouth, he took out a 8-inch butcher knife from a shop and save bag. One of the other occupants saw the knife and started yelling and screaming.
O'Leary said his training kicked in. He and his partner retreated as much as they could. They gave Weymouth orders to drop the weapon. Instead, he started stabbing himself with the knife.
You don't believe it's happening. You're kind of questioning what you're seeing. And you're checking yourself and you're checking yourself saying, is that really a knife? Is that person really stabbing himself in the stomach? Isn't he gonna stop?
He didn't. O'Leary's partner sprayed Weymouth twice with pepper spray. It had no effect. Weymouth turned towards O'Leary and lunged at him with the knife. O'Leary says that's when everything started to slow down.
I remember the shell casings coming out slow. And I remember his shirt just moving slightly where the rounds were striking him.
O'Leary shot Weymouth twice in the chest, the area of the body officers are trained to shoot at.
We are trained, if we're going to shoot, is shoot at the biggest part of the body, so you're not going to miss. And we don't shoot to kill. You know, a lot of people think that we do shoot to kill, but in reality, truly, we shoot to stop the threat. And we aim at the chest because it is the biggest part, and we need not to miss.
Weymouth died at the scene. 2 weeks later, the Attorney General ruled O'Leary was legally justified in the deadly shooting. O'Leary says he's never questioned the decision he made, but the effects of the shooting have stayed with him.
And I've talked to several officers that have been involved in shootings. And if you do your checking, you'll notice that the high rates of suicide after, high rates of people just quitting the job, divorce, substance abuse, and you feel bad because, and I always said, you know, the worst person in the world, the most violent criminal, still has somebody out there that loves them or has feelings for them, and you really take it for that.
Sometimes when I look at it, I feel like I could reach out and brush that hair out of his eyes.
The paintings and pictures are reminders.
It captured him that well.
Of what life used to be like.
These were all in place before Cam died.
And what's now missing in the Aragoni family.
And there's a big hole right in the middle of our embraces.
Lori, Chuck, and Marissa sat down with us to share their story.
It's hard to live with. I can't. It's impossible. It's very difficult.
For the first time on camera, they're talking about the night their son and brother Cameron was shot and killed by a police officer. They say to fully understand what happened, it's important to understand Cameron.
He just brought joy into our lives, our very first baby.
They describe him as a gentle soul who was extremely creative. He played piano, learning tunes by ear. He would often spend hours upon hours tweaking videos. Some have thousands of views on YouTube.
He would work and work and work and work until he would get it just right. And I mean days and days and days, weeks sometimes.
Cameron had Asperger's and battled with depression.
Cam was self-medicating at the time. And it had been a few months that we could see him, going downhill. And we couldn't get through to him that self-medication wasn't the way to go.
On the night of June 9th, 2013, Cameron had been drinking, had a gun, and was threatening suicide. His girlfriend was trying to get him help.
I know how bad the situation looks, but when you really think about it, he was just a suicidal person, and that's who you expect to help. You expect the police to help you. You expect to call 911 and get help.
2 Hampden police officers responded to the apartment Cameron shared with his girlfriend. According to the Attorney General's report, they heard shouting and entered the apartment. Police say Cameron turned the gun on the officers. They shot him twice, and Cameron died at the hospital.
It's just who you are now. We're members of a club that is the most horrendous club on earth, and that's the parents who have lost a child.
The Aragonis don't believe Cameron would have turned the gun on the officers and question the police response. They wonder if there would have been a different outcome had they or a crisis team been there that night.
It makes me sick that it was a cry for help and he didn't get help, he got shot. I feel that if there was a crisis team or if someone was able to get him to a hospital or any sort of mental health professional, they could have talked him down from it.
They say they know they're not alone, that mental health plays a role in shootings across the country. According to research conducted by the Treatment Advocacy Center in Virginia, a minimum of 1 in every 4 fatal police encounters involves someone with a severe mental illness. The Aragonis say that has to change.
Mental health conditions need to be recognized and treated properly. And I don't believe we have those resources in place. And that would be a big step.
They hope sharing their story may raise questions about training and response for cases like Cameron's.
Things need to change, and hopefully we can help make a change for the better so that no other family, no other lives are shattered in the way our lives were shattered.
We did reach out to the Hampden Police Department. They had no comment on the Aragoni case. Now, the Attorney General did clear both officers involved in the Aragoni case, and they have found every other shooting in Maine legally justified since 1995.
The Attorney General's office declined an interview for this story, but did provide us with the guidelines they use in their investigation. Investigators look at whether self-defense or the defense of others was reasonably generated by the facts. Under Maine law, to be justified in using deadly force in self-defense, two requirements must be met. First, the person must actually and reasonably believe deadly force is imminently threatened against them or someone else. And second, the person must actually and reasonably believe deadly force is necessary to counter that imminent threat. The review does not include whether the use of deadly force could have been avoided.
That's really only part of the equation.
Jamesa Drake is an attorney with the ACLU of Maine. She says in order to decide if a shooting was reasonable, it's crucial to ask whether or not it was preventable.
And we have to conduct a better, more in-depth analysis of training and community resources, police procedures. We have to ask how these deaths could have been prevented or if they could have been prevented.